Dr. Robin.
Terrific, terrific. Well, welcome to all of you. I'm really excited to be here with you today. And as we start, please be sure to log into menti.com on your phones or your laptops and type in the code that you see in our chat box. This will enable you to interact with the presentation, and then certainly also feel free to use the time to connect with me on social media. You can find me on Instagram, LinkedIn, and thanks to my teenagers, TikTok. When I was 23 years old, I was a first-year doctoral student. It was December, and I was at the holiday department party talking with a group of my friends. The chair of the department stood in the corner holding a drink as he watched the party, wearing the condescending smirk that he always had on. He wandered over to my group, hanging on the fringe of the circle, staring at us for a few minutes. Then he stepped into the middle of our circle, interrupting our conversation to say, "It's such a shame that young women waste their time getting their degrees. All they're going to end up doing is getting married, having kids, and never use their education." And then he walked away. No one said anything. We were all frozen. This man had made sure to use his power over our graduate careers to create a culture in which no one would dare object to his offensive statement. Clearly, this man demonstrated how not to create psychological safety. This has also happened regularly to me over the past year. Last year, you might have read in my bio, I gave a TEDx talk, and the title that the creators of that TEDx event did was definitely designed as clickbait. Sometimes I'm in a group or at an event, and the conversation is candid and open, clearly supportive of women's empowerment, and specifically women's sexual health. So I share the title of my talk and what the talk is truly about, and it inspires further conversation and healthy debate, certainly psychological safety. And then there are times when I completely misread a room, or in all honesty, don't really care about the reaction I'm about to get. I get asked about my TEDx talk, and I say the title, "Why I Gave My Teenage Daughter a Vibrator, and You Should Too." And suddenly, it's crickets. The group stops talking, or someone offers a hostile response, and the conversation ends due to the lack of psychological safety for those in that situation. I am sure each of you have stories similar to these. Those situations in which you felt uncomfortable or intimidated or even unsafe to voice your thoughts or opinions. In those moments, you're not experiencing psychological safety, and it inhibited you from participating comfortably and fully. Psychological safety is a term coined in 1999 by Harvard scholar Amy Edmondson. Over the past 24 years, this concept has gained significant focus, particularly as we're starting to realize the importance of mental health in the workplace. Personally, I like to think of psychological safety through the analogy of wingsuits. These contraptions are relatively simple in design, but wingsuits allow individuals crazy enough to wear them to jump off mountains and cliffs and buildings or out of planes. They get to engage in risky behavior safely. Psychological safety in the workplace acts as a professional wingsuit. It allows you and the teams in your organizations to take risks because they know they are safe. So before we begin exploring how to create psychological safety, it's important that we define it. When you think about the term psychological safety or think about a psychologically safe workplace, how would you describe it? Through the Menti app that you connected on your devices, please add your thoughts to create our word cloud around psychological safety. So you get to type right into the app, and then we will see the word cloud that you create. Empathetic, welcoming, supportive. Thank you for those first ones. Welcoming. Failure is okay. I love that. Honest, authentic, open. No judgment. Equal. No retribution. Oh, I love these. Real. You guys are nailing this. This is awesome. Ask my boss. I lost that one. Unapologetic. My gosh, you're doing this fast and furious. I love this. Ask my boss what I want. Sometimes overused. Oh, I appreciate that. Not political. Bravery, candid. Safe for conflict. We're going to get to that. No disguises. Empowered. Diversity, willingness. Fearless. Forgiving. Transparent. You guys certainly understand what psychological safety should look like. And today we're going to talk a little bit more about how to help create this. Thank you for all your responses. Okay. I was actually doing a similar talk about a year ago. And before I started, I might have made the mistake of asking the audience if anyone had any questions right at the beginning. A woman raised her hand, walked over to the microphone and asked, "Isn't psychological safety just about being nice and respectful? I mean, do we really need an hour to discuss this?" Which is always a great way as a speaker to have a talk start. Now, she wasn't wrong. Treating people respectfully and with civility are a part of a psychologically safe workplace. But these two adjectives don't capture the full complexity of what psychological safety, as you noted in the word cloud. Essentially, psychological safety is a belief that you and others will not be punished or humiliated for speaking up with ideas, questions, concerns, or mistakes. It's an absence of interpersonal fear. If I had a highlighter, I'd highlight that one. In a work environment, psychological safety supports the belief that it is safe to take risks regarding your behaviors in the group. Overall, there's workplace trust in place when there is psychological safety. So, are you curious about your own workplace and its level of psychological safety? On your own, do a quick analysis of your perception of your own psychological safety. Jot down your responses to these statements in your notes. And once you're done, sum up your responses. I'll give you about a minute to do so. I feel like there should be Jeopardy music going on in the background.
And then, Dr. Robin, you want people to follow along on menti.com instead of sharing your screen, right?
Whatever works for them. I'm okay. Good.
Yep.
I like having options, Evelyn. So whatever works best for each individual. You have about 30 more seconds. And remember, once you're done, you can calculate or sum up the numbers that you attributed to each of those statements. Okay. A higher score reflects a higher level of psychological safety. And I really hope each of you is staring at a high score. But whatever your number, we're going to talk about what you can do to create or enhance the psychological safety in your workplace. We're going to review 9 action steps you can do to help create or enhance psychological safety right where you are at your workplace. I love inspiring or motivating people, but one of the biggest things I always want to help people do is actually be able to walk out of a talk and have some things they can actually put into place immediately to create the space that they want to be in. So the first action step is to create psychological safety is to be present. Sounds simple enough, right? But this refers to engagement, whether as a leader or as a team member. And engagement is reflected through 4 specific behaviors: active listening, eye contact, staying off technology during one-to-one meetings or in group discussions, and asking follow-up questions regarding any ideas or information being shared individually, one-on-one, or in a group meeting. This one is challenging because in our society, which idealizes multitasking and being busy, the goal of being present can be really challenging. but you get to prioritize connection and psychological safety over dysfunctional habits, which unconsciously undermine psychological safety. The beauty of everything we're going to talk about is it's your choice. A related action step is to create a toolbox for understanding. By showing that you understand, or at least trying to understand what is being said, you create psychological safety for that person. And by working towards understanding, you also foster psychological safety at a group or team level. So one specific strategy to do this, which you've certainly heard of, is through paraphrasing. So for example, what I heard you say was, and then you try and summarize what the information you received was. When you do this, you're ensuring you understand exactly what the other person is presenting, or you allow them to clarify. You can also use specifically this approach of asking for clarification by saying something like, I want to make sure I'm clear on your point. So can you explain this? This makes your intention of understanding obvious and authentic. When either approach is used, it's important to use body language, which communicates your goal of understanding and which is related to the first step. Nonverbal cues such as nodding, leaning forward, certainly appropriate facial expressions, and open arms and hands all communicate a desire for understanding. The last one, open arms and hands, is probably the one, if I looked at all of these, that most people in group settings have the hardest time with. Because we get comfortable. We sit back in our chairs, we cross our arms, and immediately that puts up a boundary between us and whoever's talking to us. So remember that one in particular. The third step is actually one of my favorites, and it's avoid blame. When people are hesitant to discuss challenges or failures due to fear of retribution or judgment, psychological safety is not in place, and this hinders the optimal functioning of you and the team. You probably have some examples of this from your own personal or professional lives. So as an example, last week I was checking into a hotel for another talk I was doing, and my room wasn't ready. I waited 30 minutes to get a room key, and I'm a pretty patient person, so it was no big deal to me. When the room was ready, the front desk person told me with a very serious scowl that housekeeping had been so slow and didn't let him know when the room was ready. This was a case of assigning blame. I am sure if any representative from housekeeping had heard him, it would have undermined easily the psychological safety for that person and the team. The next day, I traveled on a tram, and since I'm a chronic eavesdropper, I listened as a woman on her phone a couple seats away from me demanded that, and I quote, "The idiot who submitted the wrong order in her department be found out and brought to her in the morning." More blame. Blame and judgment are the poisons of psychological safety. Questions like who is responsible and what went wrong reduce psychological safety, and they focus on the past, which always blows my mind because the past cannot be changed. Instead, you can choose to use one simple question to increase psychological safety in this third step. And that question is, how can we do better next time? This question focuses on the future. It encourages learning from the situation. And the use of the pronoun we integrates the idea of collaboration as part of the learning, rather than me as the questioner separated from you. Next is to be a ghost. And what I mean by that is to show transparency, utilize transparency. And this seems really easy, except this requires a high level of self-awareness. And we're going to spend some time checking in on this. This involves the practice of sharing with your team, as a leader or as a team member, your best practices. So what do I mean by that? It would be things like how you work best, how you like to be recognized, how you like to communicate. This information provides an avatar for others to understand you and best interact with you. When you are transparent about your preferences, You also model behaviors which support psychological safety in the organization and which you want from other people. Many of us don't take the time to do this reflection before we are sharing with people, or even to take the time to do the reflection so we can share with others. So I want to encourage you to do this now. Take about 3 minutes to respond to these questions in your notes. So you allow yourself, you give yourself the gift of time to reflect. I'll keep track of the time.
And Dr. Robin, do you want people to reflect on the 9 tips in the previous slide and then list them, or?
Nope, they don't have to do that yet. They can just stay right here and focus on these 4 questions first.
Got it.
We'll do that at the end, Evelyn. Thank you for that question. You have about 1.5 minutes left to do your reflection. Evelyn, thank you for posting those in the chat. You have about 30 more seconds to give yourself the gift of this time for reflection. I agree, Yazzie. Evelyn's the best. Okay. What I'd ask you to do now is pick one of the ones that's your favorite from your reflection and add it to the mentee slide to share. These are all anonymous, so you don't have to worry about being revealed, but just add kind of the one that stood out for you as the one thing that was maybe most important to you. Real-time feedback. Oh, I agree with that one. Please say don't hint. I love that. Anyone else? Slack. Excellent. Yeah, I hear that from a lot of people. Trust. Chat or email for communication. Autonomy. I get to decide when and where within reason. I appreciate that. Partnership. Praise, written, self-teaching. Constructive, timely feedback. Yes. Coworkers who are flexible and willing to think about things in new ways. Agreed. Willing to go with me on a journey. I love that. That would be a good team mantra. Come on the journey. Supported and trusted as a contributor. A simple occasional thank you. Yes. Dealing with frustration by adopting change. I like that too. Transparency, rewarding results. Trusted and supported by boss. There's a lot of trust going on here and as key variables to what works best for you guys. These are a great start to your avatar. And I really appreciate the time you gave yourself. Because I know on these webinars, it's easy to get distracted with answering a quick email. But if you're like me, if I don't do it in the moment, lots of other things get in the way after I'm off the webinar. So thank you for giving yourself this time. Transparency on progress. I love this. These are terrific. Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay. Stopping negativity is the 5th action step towards a workplace of psychological safety. And overall, we know the goal of psychological safety is to work together as a functional, effective team. Negativity undermines this goal. And worse, negativity is contagious. When team members engage in gossip or patterns of negative comments or foster drama and talk about people behind their backs, it establishes the culture of that team. And others assume this is the standard. It's acceptable behavior for the group, and the practices continue and build, replacing psychological safety. In those moments, if you're like me, it is uncomfortable for us to address the negativity, to find our voice. And it's particularly uncomfortable if we're the only voice attempting to stop the behavior. Creating a plan ahead of time helps with this. So think about this. In our earliest years in school, we practiced fire drills. The reason we practice was if there was an actual fire, we wouldn't have to think about what to do. We would just do it. Having a plan and a script that helps you act rather than think about acting is important when addressing negativity. In moments when negativity is undermining psychological safety, your plan and your script allow you to effectively respond to the situation rather than letting it go. I'd like to help you create your script for these situations. So to start, I'd ask each of you to identify maybe a recent situation which involved any of these types of behaviors: negativity, gossip, drama. You know what we're talking about here in terms of all that uncomfortable stuff that we've been exposed to at work or in our personal lives. I'm going to give you a few seconds to come up with this one. And it helps to jot it down just so you keep it fresh. Okay, hopefully y'all have one. I'm sorry you have one, but hopefully you have one as an example in this situation. As you're remembering it, how did you handle it? I'd like you to write down anything you said, write down anything you did, and I'd also like you to write down if you didn't do or say anything, much like me in the example I gave from graduate school that I shared at the beginning of our session. So when you look at that situation, just write down how you dealt with it or how you avoided it, because there's no judgment here. Give you about 30 more seconds just to write down what you did or didn't do in that situation. Okay, now you get to analyze the things that you wrote down. I'd like you to put a star next to the behaviors or the words which were effective in reducing the negativity. So just go through your list and star anything that worked really well to reduce the negativity. Those words or those actions are ones you can choose to use again in future situations to achieve the same success. So you can build these into your script and your plan for the future. Now I want you to look at the unstarred items that you might have on your list. What could you adjust in those, either in words or in actions, to make them work better? So as an example, with my department chair, I could have said, that was really inappropriate. That made me feel lesser than I know I am, or something to that effect. But of course, I didn't in the situation. But in retrospect, I realized addressing it immediately would have made me feel better about the situation and might have encouraged psychological safety for others. So write down how you might adjust those unstarred items to make those work better for you in the future. And if you still need more time, you certainly can go back to this after our session. So if you're like me, some of my best options come to me about an hour after a situation happens. I get that moment of, why didn't I think of that then? If you had any of those after fact inspirations, write those down for use in the future. And then I'm not a big advocate of reinventing the wheel. So sometimes we witness other people doing or saying things that are so effective when it comes to reducing negativity. We might wish we had thought of them, but we really appreciate that they did it or they said it. And so if you have anything like that, that you've witnessed, that you've experienced, write those down because those aren't copyrighted. You can use those as part of your plan or script in the future. So if you've ever been inspired by how someone handled negativity, put that on your list as well. As a thought, if you can't think of something specific, but you know someone who always seems to say the right thing in those situations, just jot their name down so you can reflect on their behaviors and their positive actions later on. Okay. So sometime this week, I encourage you to refine your plan to stop negativity. If you want your script and plan to be easily accessible to your brain in those negative moments, it's important to review your script and plan periodically, much like our childhood fire drills. When you do this, the plan will be easily accessible to your brain when you need it. So psychologically safe environments also incorporate inclusive decision-making as an action step. This step encourages all team members to be part of decisions. Members are asked for their input, their feedback, and their thoughts. It incorporates explanations regarding final decisions, and it includes celebrating all contributions, those aligned with the final decision, as well as those which didn't align, but which help provide different perspectives to determine the final solution. I saw this happen on a local level when a city council asked for recommendations from the community regarding what to build on a newly acquired piece of land. The top suggestions were a dog park, a fitness trail, a botanical garden, and a skate park. The council met with designers and experts to determine the logistics of every solution or every suggestion. And their final decision was actually to build a skate park, which shocked the heck out of me. As you can imagine, this decision could have created a lot of pushback from especially older members of the community, but it didn't. And here's why. The council held an open forum to share their final decision for the skate park, and more importantly, to explain how they arrived at that decision. They laid out the data and specifics for every option, so their rationale was clear, and then they publicly acknowledged and appreciated all the recommendations. They emphasized that having community voices as part of the process is actually what helped make such an important decision. And then they returned to the community later on, asking for suggestions on what to name the park and important rules and guidelines that should be part of the park's protocol. In this example, the decision-making was inclusive. The leaders were fully transparent on the process of coming to the final solution. And while some community members might have advocated for a different use of the land, the city council's approach acknowledged all members' part in the process, which encourages future community involvement because they created a culture of psychological safety. The seventh step is to welcome conflict. And I know conflict seems contrary to a psychologically safe culture, but conflict gets a really bad rap. With healthy conflict becomes the ability to receive and provide feedback. For leaders, this is essential for optimal functioning of themselves and the team. Healthy conflict allows team members to challenge their leader, push back, as well as pushing back on each other. This opens up the possibility to consider new and different perspectives, and it enhances psychological safety. Again, take another look at your own life. Have you ever felt pressure to do something while you were part of a team or group that ended up resulting in some flawed decision or some catastrophe? There are some classic examples of this in American history. 1961 Bay of Pigs invasion, Space Shuttle Challenger disaster in 86, the Coca-Cola Company's creation of New Coat in 85, and more recently, some of the early management of the healthcare recommendations during the initial pandemic. This pressure to conform and not voice concerns can create a phenomenon known as groupthink. If you're not familiar with groupthink, it's a psychological phenomenon that reduces creativity and problem solving. And it typically happens when the group wants to conform with the leader. When leaders welcome healthy conflict, they reduce the chance of groupthink. And it includes leaders sharing their own challenges, failures, and insecurities. When leaders do this, they model that perfection is not the expectation, and they want divergent thinking on their teams, which again enhances psychological safety. The second to last step to create this type of culture is to champion your team. Whether you're a leadership role or a team member position, supporting and sharing about the contributions of the team enhances psychological safety. It also means that when the team misses the mark regarding a goal, individual blame is not placed. Instead, the team as a unified whole uses the situation to grow knowledge and skills. And instead of focusing on blame, they approach the failure or challenge from a framework of curiosity. The goal is for collaborative learning and troubleshooting. And this method helps solve the issue as a team, which deters disengagement and defensiveness. I'm kind of hoping that the front desk person I mentioned at the beginning of the talk went back to his team to determine how to improve guest services, and more importantly, how to support each other to enhance psychological safety. Finally, the last way to create psychological safety is by being a copper connection. Now, what do I mean by that? You see, copper is the most efficient electrical conductor. As a leader, as a team member, acting in the role of copper allows you to generate and foster connections between team members. When we have these connections, the connections facilitate all the other action steps we've discussed regarding psychological safety. So we're going to try this now. I know we don't have a visual of everybody, but what I'd like to ask you to do is I'm going to lead you through a very brief activity that I call What We Share. And if a statement I say applies to you, just put an asterisk or a thumbs up or something into the chat box. Okay? Love to dance. Love the exclamation points. That's awesome. Dance poorly, but love to do it. Good for you. Okay. Next one. Feel uncomfortable with this activity. Thank you, Samantha, for being honest. Thanks, Kristen. Thanks, Angela. Amanda. Okay. Next one. Enjoy singing when you don't think anyone is listening. Those are fast. That's great. That is terrific. I love it. Always good for you. Okay. Believe in life on other planets. You guys are picking awesome emojis. Awesome. Evelyn. Have dealt with burnout. Yeah. This is a significant one. Right now, I'm sorry. That's challenging. Okay. Hide chocolate so your kids, roommate, or significant other doesn't eat it. I could add mine to this list. Ice cream, Kelly. Yeah, agreed. I'm going to say the next one, and I would be surprised. You don't have to do it, but I'd be surprised if every woman on this call doesn't answer this, or at least 99% of us. Deal with imposter syndrome at least once a month. Me too. Okay, last one. Have felt recharged, empowered, or excited because of this day, because of this conference. Love those fast emojis. That's awesome. Good, good, good. Awesome. So you can see in this exercise that you all became copper. Through your engagement, your willingness to be transparent, you facilitated the opportunity to make connections between you and others and among others. This is the final step to creating psychological safety. But why bother? I had a CEO ask me that. I had a CEO ask me if there were measurable benefits to justify the time, energy, and potential resources to create psychological safety. I'm pretty sure I stared just a few seconds too long and blinking hard, and then responded with what I hope came across as a polite yes. Psychological safety encourages employee engagement. If they feel safe at work, it's easier for them to engage and be fully present. And this results in higher levels of productivity. It also creates an environment which encourages creativity and innovation. Ideas flow in organic ways because team members feel safe expressing themselves. It also fosters overall well-being for employees. They are more mentally healthy, which contributes to their physical health. Stress levels, anxiety, and depression are lower, resulting in less employee absenteeism. Organizations with higher psychological safety also have higher employee morale and retention. Team members are more likely to express positive statements about their organizations when there is psychological safety. And from my background in clinical psychology and a neurological perspective, psychological safety increases all the amazing and helpful neurotransmitters: dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, and endorphins. So yes to the CEO. If productivity, innovation, low absenteeism, lower insurance claims, higher retention, and happier employees are kind of important and valuable, creating psychological safety might just be worth it. So now that you know the 9 steps to create and enhance psychological safety, how will you do this as a leader or as a team member? Go ahead and in the Menti app, indicate your top action steps. It's hard to do all 9 at once, so choose the handful that are most important to you, that you're going to commit to. Start to create psychological safety for you and others in your organization. Woo! I love when it pops up so quickly. What do we have? No judgment, be a ghost, negativity. Love it. Welcome conflict. This is great. Looks like being present is winning. Oh, and now negativity monitor. I love it. Looks like we slowed down. Okay. So make sure if these are important to you, you review the notes that you might have taken during this session so that you start to develop the practices that are going to work best. I'd be happy to take any questions and appreciate any feedback you can provide through this QR code. If you use the word values, there's an additional profile activity that you might enjoy engaging in. So any questions, Evelyn?
Thank you, Dr. Robin. We have 2 people in the queue that I am going to bring up. The first, I'll bring up Kelly.
Hey there, looks like my tech is sitting up here.
Hi, Kelly.
Hi, can you guys see me or hear me? My
Can
tech
hear you just fine.
All right. So actually I had, it's funny, I have come from a culture of default camera on, mic on experience. And so my default is always just to be there and to be a present person. But I'd love to hear more about, as you were talking more about the specifics of sort of team advocacy, what tends to be the biggest thing that gets in the way? Like, why do people struggle with that one especially?
I think that from just a biological evolutionary perspective, Kelly, I'm going to go a little deep on this one. Our essence as humans is to have connection and to have support. And from, again, evolution, that's what keeps us safe. And so when we are having a dissonant view or approach, or we're about to offer something different from the group, that isn't from just a primitive level safe. And our brain fights back on anything that isn't safe. So it's creating an environment that, and I do a whole separate talk on allyship, advocacy, and activism, how we can use those three things, how we can allow ourselves to choose which role is most comfortable to contribute to psychological safety. And, from an allyship level, it can be very small things that are still very powerful. And of course, at the other end of the spectrum is activism, which is very much hopefully positive in your face actions. So it's that need for acceptance. It's the breaking through that idea of being safe so that you can really advocate for your team, and then seeing how you can implement, I call it the 3 A's, as part of your role. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you very much.
You're welcome, Kelly. The 3 A's, while we're popping up the next person, is allyship, advocacy, and activism. And what I have found is people interchange those terms, and they are very different roles. But the most important part is they are all equally important. It's not a hierarchical relationship, it's a linear relationship. And the others can't exist without each other. Well,
Melissa, if you want, you can request to join the stage, but I'm gonna read your questions so Dr. Robin can answer. What are your top tips for getting other people to stop being negative?
Melissa, if you knew that, you could write a book and make $1 million. Tips to stop people from getting negative. So what I usually tell individuals that I work with or teams that I work with is the first step is controlling the uncontrollables. A lot of times people get set into negativity because they are trying to control things that they can't control. So I encourage people to make a list. What are the things you can actually have functional control over? And what are the things that are outside of your control? When we start to delineate the difference between those, it tends to allow us to have that beneficial or effective control. And we realize much of it is outside of our control, and that's okay. So we focus on the things we can take care of, and we let go of the other things that we can't. The other thing, very honestly, at a very simplistic level, Melissa, is I ask people, leaders, team members, tell me what your diet is when it comes to media. So we know when it comes to our physical bodies, we make sure we have a variety of beneficial things going into our bodies. And every once in a while, we might have, certainly I will have chocolate. And that's okay because the majority of what I eat is good. So a little bit of chocolate, potato chips, ice cream for sure is okay. But when it comes to our cognitive and psychological diets, a lot of people forget to do the same. So they will ingest a diet of negative news, negative movies, negative TV, negative books, like a stream of basically stuff that undermines their ability to see the world in a positive way. And so I start there, and then I work with people to reprime their brains towards positivity. I am not saying that everybody should be positive and happy all the time. That's ridiculous. But what I am saying is that if you train your brain to look for the positive and look for, the happiness, it's a balance when we are hit by some of the negativity. So those are a couple of the strategies that I work with people on. Agreed, Samantha. Absolutely agreed. Any other questions that I can help you with? Certainly, again, if you're having that 2 a.m, oh, I wish I had asked this, you know how to connect with me on Instagram, on LinkedIn, or if y'all want to find me on TikTok. I don't do funny things on TikTok. My kids wish I had, but I tend to do pretty serious talks on that platform. You can also find me on drrobinbuckley.com, which is my website, and I'd be happy to answer questions offline at a later date at any point.
Thank you so much, Dr. Robin, for a very informative session. And thank you, everyone, especially Kelly. Thank you for helping others out, and so many great questions. Samantha, Dorise, Amanda, thank you so much for joining today's session. Have fun at the rest of the conference and enjoy the rest of the day.
Bye, everyone.